Okay, everybody, welcome to day 3 on the prophet Joseph Smith. So we're going to talk about additional heavenly visitations to Joseph in the process of the ongoing restoration of the gospel of Jesus Christ. So in addition to the transcendent experiences that we talked about yesterday with the Father and the Son, and if you haven't heard that one yet, you need to go back and start with that because I think the order is important. Joseph was visited by or saw in vision dozens of ancient prophets and angels. And Joseph personally interacted with diverse angels from Adam down to our present time, all declaring their dispensations, their rights, their keys, their honors, their majesty and glory, and the power of their priesthood. That verse in Doctrine and Covenants, section 128, verse 21, is significant because it speaks of the order of the kingdom and how things are put in their proper order and how things are organized, right, eternally, right, the way things really are, for lack of a better term. So through these remarkable experiences with diverse angels, Joseph came to understand that worldly knowledge pales when compared to heavenly knowledge. On one occasion, he declared this, could you gaze into heaven 5 minutes, you would know more than you would by reading all that ever was written on the subject. Pretty significant, right? President George Q. Cannon, a counselor to 4 church presidents. President George Q. Cannon was the counselor to Brigham Young, John Taylor, Wilford Woodruff, and Lorenzo Snow. This is what he said, which I really like. He said Joseph had vision after vision in order that his mind might be fully saturated, such a great word, with the knowledge of the things of God, that he might comprehend the great and holy calling that God had bestowed upon him. In this respect, he stands unique. There is no man in this dispensation who can occupy the station that he, Joseph, did, God having reserved him and ordained him for that position and bestowed upon him the necessary power. So this is part of why I wonder if we truly understand the significance of being a dispensational prophet, and why by those that truly understand that he was a prophet, and you know that he is, and we honor him, not the same way that we honor our Heavenly Father and Jesus Christ, but we honor him, but then why he's so maligned and having your life be so scrutinized, and the fact that he was imperfect, right? The Lord let him work through it. He didn't have the exact blueprint. He was asked to do things, and the Lord allowed him to learn through his mistakes. And so things weren't perfect. And so I think then everybody's like, well, then how do you trust it? Well, integrity and loyalty are an interesting thing, right? You're going to choose somebody to be loyal to. And the prophet Joseph Smith literally was reserved and ordained for who he was and what he needed to do as a dispensational prophet. Now, in his early training, the angel Moroni figured prominently in Joseph's really early tutoring, right? And we know that making at least 20 visits to him in the 1820s, that's quite a bit. 20 different visits so that Joseph could receive the information and the help that he needed. Now, let's talk a little bit about Moroni before we finish up today. The angel Moroni, he figured prominently in Joseph's early tutoring, making those 20 visits. And at the time of Moroni's first visit, Joseph was only 17 years old, right? So in 1823, Moroni's first 3 visits occurred in rapid succession through the night in the upper story of the Smith home. And Moroni said that there was a book deposited, written upon gold plates, giving an account of the former inhabitants of this continent, and the fullness of the everlasting gospel was contained in it. Now, a lot of times we're like, well, they came back and repeated it 3 times. That's not true. If you go back and read it carefully, that every time Moroni came, additional information, same information, but then additional information that Joseph needed was given to him. And as these visions went forward, later, a vision was opened so that Joseph's mind was showing him the place where the plates were deposited. And after going to the hill and uncovering the stone cavity, right, the stone box, Joseph beheld the plates, but was forbidden, right, from removing them. And he was instructed to meet Moroni at the hill a year later, right? And it's interesting that for the next 4 years, annual interviews took place atop that hill, right? Not just interviews, I think a lot of tutoring was going on, right? As Joseph came and began to learn even more, grow up a little bit in relationship to learning who he was and what he needed to become, and the church that would be restored, right? These were sacred opportunities, right? I think for Moroni to impart instruction and intelligence. That's the language that Joseph, regarding how the Lord's kingdom would be conducted in the last days, right? How things would be set up so that we could move forward in the restoration of the gospel. And I think it was, a season of refinement as Joseph incrementally began to understand what Moroni meant when he told Joseph that God had a work for him to do. You just don't learn how to do the work of the Lord overnight. There's an incremental growth and change that has to come over somebody to begin to learn how to do the work of the Lord, even when we move forward within the structure that's already being established, let alone doing it from the very beginning and restoring everything in this ongoing process of the restoration. So Moroni remained in contact with Joseph throughout the duration of the translation of the Book of Mormon, until permanently reclaiming the plates once the translation was complete. Well, what a blessing, right? To have this ancient prophet walk the road with Joseph, for lack of a better term. And I think through Moroni's careful tutelage, mentoring, instilled confidence and nurturing while preparing Joseph for future communications with a host of heavenly beings. Right? This is the beginning, just the very beginning of Joseph's tutoring and mentoring, right? So it's interesting how involved Moroni really was, right? David Whitmer recalled that when Joseph moved from Harmony, right, Pennsylvania, to Fayette in 1829 to finish the translation of the Book of Mormon, it was Moroni who transported the plates from Harmony to Fayette for protection. So there's a lot of interaction going on, right? Heavenly interaction, expected now by Joseph, interaction once that veil was lifted. His life certainly changed, and rightly so, with his calling, but also just the reality of who he is becoming. Okay, all right. Day 2, other heavenly visits. We are going to continue with more. Right? We've talked a little bit about the beginning. We talked about Moroni, but we're going to move forward through Moroni and then on into what we know about all the other help that he needed being mentored from heaven. So come back tomorrow, and I look forward to speaking with you on day 4. All right. Thank you for being here, and we'll talk to you later.